He was about to kill her, but her words changed his fate forever. Her house was small, just enough for her and her younger brother, Sami, whom she had been raising ever since their parents passed away years ago. The loss of her parents had left a deep hole in her heart, but she never let sadness stop her. She had learned to survive, to keep going, and to face each day with courage. She prepared a simple breakfast of bread and tea, careful to make enough for Sami, who was still asleep. Even though life had been hard, Aisha had a kind heart. She believed that life would be better if people treated each other with care and respect, and she tried to live by that every day. After breakfast, she packed her bag and left the small house, locking the door behind her. The streets were almost empty, and the early light made everything look peaceful. Birds chirped softly, and the distant sound of a river flowing added a quiet music to the morning. Aisha worked at a small shop in the center of the town. It was a quiet place, but she liked it because she could meet people, help them, and sometimes even learn their stories. She greeted everyone with a smile, and people often returned her smile, even if they were having a bad day. She enjoyed seeing that her small gestures of kindness could make someone's day a little brighter. But Aisha's life was not just peaceful mornings and friendly smiles. She had to walk through streets that were sometimes dark and empty, especially when she stayed late to finish work. Her brother depended on her, and she had to earn enough to pay for food, bills, and school. She carried this responsibility with a sense of duty, never complaining, though sometimes the weight of it felt heavy. Farid, on the other hand, was living a very different life. He had once been a young man full of dreams, like many others in the town. But life had been cruel to him. His father had died when he was young, and his mother had struggled to keep the family together. Over time, Farid's heart had grown cold and heavy with anger. He felt that the world had taken everything from him, leaving him with nothing but pain and bitterness. He made wrong choices, drifted from one bad decision to another, and found himself trapped in a life filled with anger and loneliness. Farid spent his days wandering the streets, trying to escape his thoughts but unable to. Each night, he felt the anger in his chest grow stronger. He believed that nobody understood him and that the world was against him. The weight of his past mistakes and the suffering he had endured had made him believe that he deserved nothing better than the life he had. One evening, as the sun was setting and the streets became quiet, Aisha was returning home from the shop. She took a shortcut through a narrow alley, hoping to get home quickly. The alley was dimly lit, with shadows stretching across the walls, and a cold wind blew through, making her shiver slightly. She hugged her bag closer and walked carefully, her senses alert but calm. Farid was in the same alley, leaning against a wall, lost in his own thoughts. His eyes were dark with anger and his hands clenched into fists. For a moment, he didn't notice Aisha walking toward him. But when he did, something inside him shifted. A part of him, the angry and desperate part, saw her as an opportunity to release the pain he carried. He stepped forward silently, watching her, feeling a strange mix of fear and excitement. Aisha noticed the movement but didn't panic. She had learned to stay calm in difficult situations. Her heart beat faster, but she reminded herself to breathe and think clearly. She looked at Farid and said softly, "Good evening. Is everything okay?" Her voice was gentle, but it carried strength. Farid was surprised by her calmness. Most people would have screamed, run, or tried to fight back. But Aisha didn't. She looked at him with kindness in her eyes, and for a moment, the darkness in his mind hesitated. Her words were simple, but they struck something deep inside him. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Aisha asked, taking a careful step forward. "You look like you're carrying a heavy burden. I can see it in your eyes." Farid didn't answer. He was confused. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. Most people either ignored him, judged him, or tried to stay away. But Aisha saw him, not the anger, not the mistakes, but the person inside. That recognition, that simple acknowledgement, was enough to make him pause. Aisha continued, speaking softly but firmly. I don't know your story, and I don't know what pain you've been through, but I do know that everyone can change. Everyone can find a way to heal if they are willing to try. Life may have been hard, but it is never too late to choose differently. Her words were like a quiet wave against the storm in Farid's heart. He felt a strange warmth, something he hadn't felt in years. He wanted to say something, to respond, but no words came. Instead, he felt the tension in his body begin to loosen, and the anger that had been building inside him for so long started to fade slightly. Aisha took another step closer, keeping her voice calm. I know it's hard. I know it feels like the world has forgotten you. But I promise you it hasn't. You are not alone, even if it feels that way. There are always chances, always moments to change the path you are on. Even now in this alley, it's not too late to choose a different way. Farid's eyes softened. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he had almost forgotten: hope. For the first time in a long time, he realized that his life didn't have to end in anger and violence. That small spark of hope, coming from a stranger who spoke words of kindness, began to grow inside him. Aisha smiled slightly, sensing the shift. I believe in you, she said simply. Even if you don't believe in yourself yet, I do. The alley seemed to become quieter, the shadows less threatening. Farid felt a tear slip down his cheek, and he wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. But the emotion was too strong to ignore. He wanted to run from it, to bury it under anger, but he couldn't. Her words had reached him where no one else could reach him. That night, Farid let go of the anger that had been consuming him. He didn't know exactly what the future would hold, but he knew one thing clearly: he had a choice. He could continue down the path of destruction, or he could take a step toward something better, something human and alive. Aisha left the alley eventually, smiling at him one last time. Remember, she said, it's never too late. You can choose kindness. You can choose hope. Farid watched her disappear into the distance, the sound of her footsteps fading. He stood there for a long time, thinking, feeling, and understanding something he hadn't felt in years. That night in the quiet alley, the darkness in his heart began to lift, and a tiny spark of change took root. From that moment, life for both Aisha and Farid was never the same. One simple act of courage and kindness had set in motion a journey that neither of them could have predicted. After that night in the alley, Aisha returned home, her heart still carrying the memory of the encounter. She didn't know the man's name, but she remembered the look in his eyes, the anger, the sadness, and then the brief flicker of something different, something human. She often wondered about him, hoping that he would find a better path, even though she might never see him again. Her life had its challenges, but she always tried to carry hope and kindness in her heart, believing that even a small act could change someone's life. Meanwhile, Farid could not forget her words. The memory of her calm voice and the hope she offered stayed with him, haunting his thoughts. For days, he wandered the streets, trying to push the memory away, but it returned every time he felt anger rising. He had lived with pain and hatred for so long that the idea of change felt strange, almost impossible. Yet a part of him wanted it. A part of him longed to believe that someone could see him, not the darkness, not the mistakes, but the person he still could become. But the world around Farid was not forgiving. Old habits, old friends, and old circumstances pulled him back toward the path he wanted to leave behind. He saw opportunities to lash out, to let his anger take over, to hurt others as he felt hurt. Yet every time he approached that moment, he heard Aisha's words echoing in his mind. It's never too late to choose differently. You can choose kindness. You can choose hope. One evening, Farid found himself in the same alley where he had almost done something he could never take back. The memories of that night came rushing back, the fear in her eyes, the calmness in her voice, and the truth she had spoken. He leaned against the wall, overwhelmed by the contrast between the man he had been and the man he wanted to become. The alley, once dark and threatening, now seemed to be a place of reflection, a place where he could decide what kind of life he wanted to lead. But change is never easy. Farid struggled with his own mind. The anger, the resentment, and the pain did not disappear overnight. He argued with himself constantly, "You are weak. You cannot change. The world will never accept you." Yet Aisha's words kept returning, persistent, gentle, and impossible to ignore. They reminded him that he had a choice, even if it was the hardest choice he would ever make. To try to distract himself, Farid spent his days wandering the town, observing life from a distance. He watched families laughing together, children playing in the streets, and shopkeepers greeting customers with smiles. These simple moments, which he had once ignored or envied, began to feel important to him. He noticed how ordinary people, even in difficult circumstances, could carry kindness and hope. Each observation reminded him of the life he had abandoned long ago, the life he could still reclaim. Farid began small. At first, he avoided trouble, staying away from fights and arguments that would have consumed him before. He started helping people in small ways, carrying heavy bags for elderly neighbors, giving directions to strangers, or simply holding the door open. These small acts did not erase the years of pain and mistakes, but they felt like seeds being planted in his heart. Each act reminded him of the person he wanted to be, the person Aisha had reminded him existed inside him. Despite his efforts, Farid still faced internal battles. Sometimes, when the memories of betrayal and loss became too strong, he would feel the old anger rising. He would clench his fists, grind his teeth, and feel the desire to lash out. But each time, he remembered Aisha's calm eyes and the words she had spoken. He remembered her courage, the way she had faced him without fear, without judgment, and offered hope instead of anger. That memory became his anchor, something to hold on to when the storms of his mind threatened to pull him back into darkness. Aisha, meanwhile, continued her life, unaware of the profound impact she had on Farid. She continued walking the streets, helping people, and offering smiles where she could. She had her own struggles. Sami was growing older, and school fees, bills, and daily responsibilities often weighed heavily on her shoulders. But she never let her struggles harden her heart. She believed that kindness, even in small doses, could make a difference in the world. Little did she know, her words had already changed one life forever. One afternoon, Farid saw Aisha from a distance as she helped an old woman carry a basket of vegetables across the street. He watched her, hidden behind a wall, and felt a mix of emotions: admiration, gratitude, and a longing to be worthy of such kindness. He realized that she was not just a symbol of hope for him, but a reminder that the world was full of people capable of goodness, and that he could still choose to be one of them. As the days passed, Farid began to reach out more. He started talking to people in the town, offering help when he could, and listening to the stories of those around him. He discovered that life was not just about surviving, it was about connecting, learning, and growing. Each interaction reminded him that he was not alone, and that the choices he made now could shape his future. Yet, one night, Farid faced a true test of his resolve. He encountered a group of men who tried to provoke him into a fight. In the past, he would have reacted with anger, letting his emotions control him. But this time, he paused. He remembered the alley, Aisha's calm voice, and the chance she had given him to change. Instead of retaliating, he walked away, choosing peace over violence, control over chaos. The decision was hard, but it strengthened him, giving him a sense of pride he had never felt before. Farid also started to think about his past actions, the mistakes he had made, the people he had hurt, and the opportunities he had wasted. The weight of guilt was heavy, but instead of letting it crush him, he used it as motivation. He wanted to make amends, to help others, and to ensure that no one else felt the despair he had felt. It was not an easy journey, and he knew he would stumble many times, but he was willing to try because he had tasted the possibility of change. Slowly, Farid began to dream again. He imagined a life where he could contribute to his community, build relationships, and find peace within himself. He realized that anger and bitterness had only held him back, and that by choosing hope and kindness, he could create a future that mattered. The memories of that night in the alley became a guiding light, reminding him that even the smallest encounter could spark a transformation. Meanwhile, Aisha continued to move through her days with quiet courage. She never sought recognition or reward for her actions. She simply believed that one person could make a difference, and she lived by that belief. Farid, though she did not know it, was living proof of that truth. Her words had reached a heart that was nearly lost to darkness, and they were slowly helping him rebuild a life he had once thought impossible. As weeks turned into months, Farid's transformation became more visible. He began helping children in the town, tutoring them after school, and encouraging them to believe in themselves. He reached out to families he had wronged, apologizing and seeking forgiveness where he could. Each step forward was a small victory, each act of kindness a brick in the foundation of a new life. The journey was far from over, and Farid knew that he would face challenges and doubts. But for the first time, he understood that life was not about giving up. It was about choosing, every day, to rise above the pain and darkness. He realized that Aisha's words had given him the courage to see this truth, and that her act of compassion had become the turning point of his life. And though he never saw Aisha again for many months, the impact of that single encounter continued to shape him. He carried her words like a torch in the darkness, guiding him through his struggles, reminding him of the power of hope, and showing him that even the smallest act of courage could change a life forever. Months had passed since that night in the alley, but Farid's life was far from easy. Change was not a straight path, and every step forward came with struggle. Despite his growing desire to live differently, the shadows of his past still followed him. Memories of mistakes he had made, people he had hurt, and opportunities he had wasted came back often, like uninvited guests haunting his mind. Some days, the weight of guilt and regret felt heavier than he could bear. Farid had begun to understand that change required more than just good intentions. It required courage, persistence, and the willingness to face the parts of himself he had long ignored. There were moments when he felt his old anger rising, moments when the bitterness in his heart tried to drag him back to the path he wanted to leave behind. Every time that happened, he remembered Aisha's words, the calmness in her voice, the hope she offered, the belief that he could choose differently. Her words were no longer just memory. They were a lifeline he clung to during his darkest hours. One evening, Farid found himself walking through the same narrow alley again. He had no clear purpose, only a restless feeling that he could not shake. The shadows seemed deeper than usual, and the silence of the night pressed down on him. He leaned against the wall, staring at the cracked pavement beneath his feet, and felt a familiar surge of anger and frustration. Life had not been kind, he thought. People had turned their backs on him, opportunities had slipped away, and the world seemed determined to remind him of his failures. In that moment, he felt the old urge rising, the urge to give in to anger, to lash out, to let the darkness take control. It was a temptation he had faced many times before, a temptation that had nearly destroyed him. His hands trembled slightly as he clenched them into fists, his mind clouded with conflicting thoughts. He felt the pull of his past, the weight of his mistakes, and the fear that he would never be able to change. But then, as he stood there, memories of Aisha returned with a clarity he had not expected. He remembered her calm face, her fearless eyes, and the way she had spoken to him without judgment. He remembered the hope she had offered, the belief that even he could choose differently. Her words echoed in his mind, louder than the anger and the fear. It's never too late. You can choose kindness, You can choose hope. Farid closed his eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of clarity. He realized that the anger he felt was a choice, and so was the path he wanted to take. The moment was fragile, a delicate balance between destruction and redemption. He understood that one wrong move, one moment of weakness, could undo all the progress he had made. And yet, the possibility of change, of becoming a better person, felt stronger than the fear that had held him captive for so long. The alley, once a place of danger and darkness, now seemed almost sacred. It was the place where he had been confronted by his own choices, the place where he had first heard the words that would shape his future. He realized that life was not about avoiding mistakes or pain. It was about facing them, learning from them, and choosing to move forward despite them. Suddenly, Farid heard a voice behind him. He turned quickly, heart pounding, and saw a young man from the neighborhood, angry and aggressive, approaching him. The man had a reputation for causing trouble, and he had a score to settle with Farid from an old disagreement. In the past, Farid would have met aggression with aggression, letting his anger guide his actions. But this time was different. For a moment, the old fear and rage surged inside him. The man shouted insults, trying to provoke him, but Farid stood still. He felt the anger in his chest, the familiar heat of resentment, but he also felt something new, a sense of control, a sense of choice. He could react the way he always had, or he could choose differently. Farid remembered Aisha's words again, and he made a decision. Instead of responding with violence, he stepped aside and spoke calmly. "I don't want trouble. Let's talk instead of fighting." His voice was steady, filled with a calm he had never felt before. The young man hesitated, surprised by the unexpected response, and then stormed off, grumbling but no longer threatening him. The encounter left Farid shaken but also strangely empowered. He realized that his strength did not come from anger or violence. It came from self-control, from the ability to choose a better path even when it was difficult. For the first time, he felt that change was not only possible, it was within his grasp. But life would not let him grow without testing him further. Days later, Farid was confronted by news that someone from his past had suffered because of a mistake he had made years ago. Guilt flooded his heart, threatening to pull him back into despair. He felt the old temptation to give up, to sink into anger, to blame the world for his misfortune. The weight of his past pressed down on him, and for the first time he felt truly overwhelmed. He sat alone in the alley, staring at the ground, questioning everything. Could he really change? Was it possible to leave behind the pain and mistakes that had defined his life for so long? Doubts and fears swirled in his mind, threatening to undo all he had worked for. The struggle was intense, and for hours he wrestled with himself, torn between despair and hope. Then slowly, he remembered her words once more. He recalled the courage she had shown, the kindness she had offered without expecting anything in return. He realized that she had seen something in him that even he had forgotten existed, a spark of humanity, a chance for redemption. The thought gave him the strength to face his own darkness, to confront the guilt and pain without letting them define him. Farid began to write letters to the people he had hurt, apologizing for his mistakes and seeking forgiveness. He knew he could not change the past, but he could try to make amends and take responsibility for his actions. Each letter was difficult to write, each apology hard to say, but with every step he felt a weight lifting from his heart. He realized that growth required humility, honesty, and the courage to face consequences, even when it was uncomfortable. During this time, Farid also began to reflect deeply on his life. He thought about the choices he had made, the people he had lost, and the opportunities he had ignored. He saw patterns in his behavior, anger, fear, isolation, that had kept him trapped in a cycle of pain. And he began to make a plan, small steps to build a life that reflected the person he wanted to become. He started volunteering at the community center, helping children with their homework and guiding teenagers away from trouble. He discovered that teaching, listening, and helping others brought him a sense of fulfillment he had never known. Each smile, each word of gratitude reminded him that he was capable of doing good, of leaving a positive mark on the world. Even though the journey was far from easy, Farid began to see progress. He learned that change was not a single moment but a continuous effort, a daily choice to act with integrity, kindness, and courage. He realized that the past could not be erased, but it could be used as a teacher, guiding him toward a better future. And through it all, the memory of Aisha remained a guiding light. He never saw her again, yet her presence in his mind gave him strength, hope, and the courage to face the hardest parts of himself. He understood now that her words had been a turning point, a spark that had ignited a journey of transformation. The alley where they had met, once a place of fear and danger, had become a symbol of possibility, a reminder that one encounter, one act of courage could change the course of a life. By the end of that period, Farid was no longer the man he had been. He was still learning, still growing, and still facing challenges, but he had begun to take control of his life. He had chosen a path of hope, kindness, and courage, and he understood that true strength came from the ability to face one's own darkness and choose light instead. And though the struggles would continue, Farid knew that he had changed in ways he could never have imagined that night in the alley. The anger that once ruled him had been replaced by determination. The despair that once consumed him had been replaced by hope, and the loneliness that once defined him had been replaced by a sense of connection, to himself, to others, and to the world around him. As the weeks turned into months, Farid's life began to feel different, though the change was gradual and not always easy to notice. Every morning, he woke with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to make better choices and leave behind the habits that had once controlled him. He started taking small steps to create a life filled with meaning, rather than letting anger and despair guide his days. The road ahead was not simple, but for the first time in years, he felt as though he had direction. Farid continued volunteering at the community center. At first, it had been intimidating. He was unsure if the children or their parents would accept him, knowing his troubled past. But slowly, trust began to form. The children warmed to him because he listened without judgment and offered guidance with patience. Teenagers who had once avoided him now sought his advice. Helping others reminded Farid of the humanity inside him that he had almost forgotten. With each small success, he felt more confident and capable of building the life he wanted. Despite this progress, life continued to test him. One day, Farid received news that an old acquaintance had been arrested for a crime. It reminded him painfully of the people he had once associated with, those who had pulled him toward darkness and destruction. For a moment, he felt fear and doubt creeping in. He wondered if he was truly capable of staying on a new path, if he could resist the temptation to fall back into old patterns. But he remembered Aisha's words, the memory of her calm voice and her belief in him. He realized that he could not control the past or others' choices, but he could control his own. That understanding gave him strength. Farid also began reconnecting with his own family. He had been distant for years, ashamed of the mistakes he had made and the path he had followed. It was difficult to reach out, but he sent letters and made cautious phone calls, apologizing and explaining his desire to change. Slowly, bridges were rebuilt. Family members who had once doubted him began to see his sincerity. Farid realized that forgiveness, both giving and receiving it, was an essential part of healing. Reconnecting with his family gave him a deep sense of belonging that he had long missed. In the town, Farid's reputation began to shift. People who had once feared or avoided him began to see the difference in his actions and attitude. He was no longer just the angry, troubled man from the past. He had become someone who cared for others, who acted with integrity and compassion. Some were surprised, others skeptical, but over time, trust grew. Farid learned that change was visible not just in how he felt inside, but in how he interacted with the world around him. Actions spoke louder than words, and he worked tirelessly to prove that he could be reliable, kind, and responsible. As Farid continued on this journey, he discovered something remarkable. He began to enjoy life again. Small things that he had ignored or dismissed before, like the laughter of children, the smell of fresh bread from a local bakery, or the quiet beauty of the river at sunset, became sources of joy. He realized that his old life had been consumed by anger and despair, leaving little room for appreciation. Now, he felt fully alive, noticing details and moments he had long overlooked. Life, he realized, could be beautiful if he allowed himself to see it. But growth was not just about external change. It required internal reflection as well. Farid began to spend time alone, thinking deeply about his past and the choices he had made. He wrote in journals, recording his thoughts, his fears, and his hopes. Writing became a way to confront the darkness inside him without letting it take control. He reflected on his mistakes, understood their consequences, and learned lessons he vowed never to forget. This practice of self-reflection became a cornerstone of his transformation, helping him stay mindful and intentional with every decision he made. One afternoon, Farid encountered a young boy named Imran at the community center. Imran reminded him of himself at that age, confused, angry, and desperate for guidance. Farid saw in the boy the same potential he had once ignored in himself. He spent extra time mentoring him, teaching him not only academic lessons but also life lessons. How to control anger, how to respect others, how to find hope even in difficult circumstances. Imran began to trust him, and Farid felt a deep satisfaction he had never experienced before. Helping the boy succeed became a symbol of Farid's own growth and redemption. Farid also started participating in community projects. He helped clean the streets, plant trees, and organize events that brought people together. The sense of purpose he felt was unlike anything he had experienced during his years of wandering aimlessly. Each project was a chance to give back, to prove that his life had value and that he could contribute positively to society. With every action, he reinforced the belief that he could create a life of meaning, built on kindness, effort, and responsibility. During this time, Farid's relationships with others deepened. He met people who had faced their own challenges and were striving to overcome them. He formed friendships based on mutual support, understanding, and trust. Unlike the relationships of his past, which had been shallow or destructive, these connections nourished him. He realized that a meaningful life was not built alone. It required connection, empathy, and the willingness to support others. One evening, Farid walked past the alley where he had first met Aisha. The memories of that night came rushing back. The fear, the anger, the moment when her words had stopped him from doing something terrible. He stood there quietly, reflecting on how far he had come. The alley, once a symbol of danger and despair, now felt like a place of transformation. It reminded him that even the darkest moments could be the starting point of something new, if one was willing to listen, reflect, and act with courage. As Farid continued his journey, he also focused on his own personal growth. He learned to manage stress, to control impulses, and to approach life with patience. He practiced gratitude daily, reminding himself of the opportunities he had been given and the people who had supported him. He discovered that inner peace was not the absence of difficulty, but the ability to navigate challenges with a calm and determined heart. Each day, he felt stronger, more grounded, and more capable of creating a positive impact in the world. Farid's transformation did not go unnoticed. People in the town began to speak of him in a new light. They saw a man who had faced his past, confronted his mistakes, and chosen to become better. Some were inspired to reflect on their own lives, realizing that change was possible no matter how difficult circumstances might seem. Farid became a quiet symbol of hope and resilience, proof that even the deepest darkness could give way to light. One afternoon, while helping organize a town event, Farid saw a young woman handing out food to children. Her presence felt familiar, and for a moment his heart skipped a beat. Though he did not approach her, he recognized the qualities she embodied: kindness, courage, and an unwavering belief in the good in people. He smiled quietly to himself, realizing that it was not necessary to see her again for the memory of her words to continue guiding him. Her impact had already changed the course of his life. Farid also began to dream of the future in a way he never had before. He imagined a life where he could continue helping people, where he could rebuild trust with his community, and where he could live with integrity and purpose. These dreams no longer felt impossible or distant. They felt attainable because he had already taken the first steps toward realizing them. Each day, he worked toward these goals with determination, understanding that transformation was a continuous process rather than a single moment. By the end of this period, Farid had grown into a man who could face challenges with courage, who could respond to conflict with calmness, and who could offer hope to others as he had once been given hope. His life was still far from perfect, but it was full of meaning, purpose, and connection. He had learned that true change was not about erasing the past, but about learning from it, making better choices, and acting with integrity. Farid often reflected on the night in the alley, knowing that without Aisha's words, he might never have found the strength to change. He realized that her courage and compassion had not only saved him from a tragic moment, but had also ignited a transformation that would affect countless lives, including his own. He had become living proof that even in the darkest moments, one encounter, one act of kindness, could create a ripple of hope that extended far beyond what anyone could see. Farid's life had changed in ways he could hardly have imagined on that night in the alley. The man who had once walked with anger, despair, and bitterness now walked with purpose, hope, and a growing sense of responsibility. Though he still faced challenges and occasional setbacks, he no longer felt trapped by his past. Each day became a chance to build something meaningful, not just for himself, but for the people around him. He continued his work at the community center, but now he took on more responsibility. He organized programs to help children with education, encouraged teenagers to stay on the right path, and even started small workshops for adults who had faced difficulties in life. His goal was simple: to show people that change was possible and that no one had to be defined by their past mistakes. Farid wanted others to experience the hope and guidance that had transformed his own life. One day, a young man approached Farid. His name was Imran, the same boy Farid had mentored months earlier. Imran had faced challenges at home and at school, and for a while he had lost faith in himself. But Farid's guidance, patience, and support had helped him regain confidence. Imran smiled nervously and said, "I just wanted to thank you, Farid. Because of you, I believe I can do better." Hearing this, Farid felt a warmth in his heart that he had never known before. It was a feeling deeper than happiness, an understanding that his actions could truly impact lives. In that moment, he realized that transformation was not just about his own journey. It was about creating ripples of hope that extended far beyond himself. A single act of kindness, a word of encouragement, or a listening ear could change someone's life just as Aisha had changed his. Farid also began rebuilding relationships with his extended family. The distance and resentment of years could not be erased overnight, but through patience, honesty, and consistent effort, trust slowly returned. Family gatherings became moments of laughter, conversation, and connection. Farid learned to value these moments more than he ever had, understanding that family was not just about shared blood, but about forgiveness, understanding, and mutual support. The town itself started noticing Farid's transformation. People who had once avoided him or viewed him with fear now approached him with respect and curiosity. They asked for his advice, sought his help in organizing community events, or simply stopped to talk. Farid realized that living with integrity and kindness was contagious. His life had become an example that no matter how troubled someone's past might be, change was always possible. Despite his progress, Farid never forgot the night that had set everything in motion. He often walked past the alley where he had met Aisha, reflecting on how a single encounter could alter the course of a life. He remembered her words clearly. "It's never too late to choose differently. You can choose kindness. You can choose hope." Those words had not only prevented a tragedy, but had also sparked a lifelong journey of transformation, redemption, and service to others. He realized that her courage and compassion had created a ripple that would continue to spread far beyond that moment. Farid's own character had grown stronger through this journey. He had learned patience, self-control, and empathy. He no longer reacted impulsively, nor did he allow anger to dictate his actions. Instead, he approached challenges with thoughtfulness, understanding that every choice mattered. Even when difficult situations arose, he remained calm and sought solutions rather than letting frustration or resentment take control. This ability to act with wisdom and compassion became his greatest strength. In time, Farid began to mentor other troubled youth in the town. Teenagers and young adults who had faced struggles similar to those he had experienced reached out to him for guidance. Farid shared his story openly, not to boast, but to show that change was possible. He spoke about his mistakes, his regrets, and the moment that had changed everything. His honesty resonated with others, inspiring them to believe that they too could transform their lives if they were willing to face their fears and take positive steps forward. One afternoon, Farid encountered a young woman volunteering at the town library. Her presence felt familiar, and for a moment, he wondered if she could be connected to the person who had once spoken words that saved his life. Though he did not approach her directly, he observed her interactions with care, realizing that qualities such as courage, kindness, and empathy could be found in many people who chose to make a difference. This realization reminded him that the world contained countless opportunities for hope and connection, and that he could continue to contribute in meaningful ways. Farid also took time for personal growth and reflection. He spent quiet evenings journaling, meditating, or walking along the riverbank, thinking about his journey and the lessons he had learned. He understood that self-awareness was essential to maintain the progress he had made. By examining his thoughts and actions daily, he ensured that he would not repeat the mistakes of the past. This practice of introspection allowed him to stay grounded, humble, and focused on his long-term goals. As Farid's life improved, he began to dream bigger. He imagined a community where young people could grow safely, where families could support each other, and where acts of kindness were celebrated. He envisioned initiatives to provide education, mentorship, and opportunities for those who had been overlooked or marginalized. These dreams were not abstract fantasies. They were plans grounded in his experience, shaped by the belief that one person's courage and compassion could ignite change on a larger scale. Farid also embraced gratitude in every aspect of his life. He often reflected on the people who had guided him, supported him, and believed in him when he had doubted himself. Most of all, he thought of Aisha, the stranger who had spoken words of hope when he needed them most. Though he never saw her again, he felt a profound sense of gratitude for the way she had shaped his life. Her courage had given him a second chance, and he carried that lesson in every action he took. The final test of Farid's transformation came when he faced a situation similar to the one that had almost led to tragedy months ago. A troubled young man entered the alley, anger and despair written clearly on his face. Farid saw the same fear, rage, and hopelessness in the boy that he had once felt in himself. The moment was tense, a delicate balance between danger and opportunity, but Farid did not hesitate. He spoke calmly, just as Aisha had spoken to him. "I know how hard it feels. I know it seems like the world has turned against you, but it's never too late to choose differently. You can make better choices, and you can find hope." His words carried weight because they were rooted in experience. He did not lecture or threaten. He offered understanding, compassion, and the possibility of change. The young man hesitated, caught between anger and the unfamiliar warmth of Farid's words. Slowly, he lowered his fists and listened. Farid guided him away from the shadows of the alley and toward the possibility of a new path, offering support and a plan to make better choices. In that moment, Farid realized the full circle of his journey. The life-changing moment he had experienced months earlier could now ripple forward through his own actions, giving someone else a chance at redemption. By helping the young man, Farid understood that transformation was not a single act but a continuous process. It required vigilance, empathy, and the willingness to step forward when others were in need. He saw the truth in the lesson he had learned. One act of courage, one choice guided by kindness, could change a life forever. He had experienced it himself, and now he was able to give that gift to someone else. Farid's life, once filled with despair and anger, had become a testament to the power of hope, compassion, and human connection. He no longer felt lost or alone. His family, friends, and community had become sources of support and inspiration. His actions impacted countless lives, demonstrating that even the darkest beginnings could lead to a brighter future when guided by courage, honesty, and empathy. And though Farid never forgot Aisha, the stranger who had spoken words that changed his fate, he also realized that the true power lay not just in her words, but in the choices he had made afterward. Her courage had opened the door, but he had walked through it, step by step, learning, growing, and creating a life of purpose. He understood that every person had the ability to change, to rise above past mistakes, and to leave a positive mark on the world. In the end, Farid became more than a survivor of his past. He became a guide, a mentor, and a symbol of hope for those who struggled. His life illustrated the truth that human beings could transform through courage, reflection, and compassion, not by erasing the past, but by learning from it and choosing a better future. He had been given a second chance, and he dedicated every day to honoring it, showing that even the smallest spark of kindness could ignite a lifetime of change. And so, the story that began in fear and danger ended in hope and transformation. Farid's journey, inspired by the courage and compassion of a single stranger, became a reminder that no one is beyond redemption, and that even in the darkest moments, the right words, the right actions, and the right choice can change a life forever.